Billy Dec is an entrepreneur and restaurateur who opened Sunda New Asian in his hometown of Chicago in 2009. In March, he opened a new location of Sunda in downtown Detroit between the Fox and Fillmore theaters. He also has a new documentary on PBS about his journey back to the Philippines to connect with his family's recipes and history. Tell me about the documentary about food roots.
Yeah, it started just completely organic in a really unique way. I always loved the food that my Lola, who's as grandma in the Philippines, raised us on. But as we grew up, going back and forth to the Philippines, or just growing up in a household with Filipino food cooked 24/7 and Tagalog spoken, um, I began to push away from it when I was in middle school, high school. There was a lot of bullying and other things, pressures to make you fit in. Today it's a little different, which I love, but back then it was a little tough. And as I kind of, grew up and tried to make it in the world where everyone says, go to college, go to law school, or go to Harvard, get on TV, or act or work for the White House. Like I did all that. I was trying to do all those things, but I still wasn't happy. And in my mind, I just knew that I always wanted to go back to the Philippines to learn those recipes that I wasn't ever there for. You had to be present. They're not written down, they're story. And so one day, two of my last three elders died on the same day, and I dropped everything because I knew there was one last remaining elder of that generation. And I just went to go search that out. And I actually had filmed in the Philippines before, and I asked these shooters and editors, could they come with me so that I wasn't writing things down? I wasn't consumed with documenting. I just wanted to be present and they could capture it. And when we got back, that's when we found out that the footage was really amazing. And who but a Detroit native, Doug Blush, who's a three-time Oscar-winning executive producer and editor, saw the footage and he was like, we could make something really wonderful about this, especially with this new director who's an Emmy-winning Filipino director named Michelle Houseway that had done Matthew Shepard as a friend of mine and Happy Jail and some other really wonderful things. They were like, listen, there's something going on that you're not talking about as we look at this footage. There's something you're skating around. And if we could get you to just open up and do one thing, we'll come out, we'll take on the project. And it was just that they had saw some things I'd been wrestling with from, family and emotion and darkness and, things lost. And they said, they started talking to me and my chef and my sister, my family, and captured all of this story that starts with food, but then it dives down to your roots, your culture, your heritage, your story, your lineage, your identity. They're just a master storytellers, and they knew how to take what was really there and um, create something meaningful for all. And then we went on the film fest kind of tour because we wanted to get it to communities. We didn't want to just put it out there and then it would be over because we felt like there was discussion that needed to happen, especially with respect to identity, mental illness, other challenges. People were laughing and crying and of course hungry afterwards. But like it was a human story. It was a story that maybe people needed to see and hear and feel.
Your newest restaurant is
Yeah.
the Detroit location of Sunda, which has just recently opened. Why did you end up picking Detroit as the new location
Yeah.
for Sunda?
The foundation really is that so many Michigan folks have been in Chicago for good portions of their lives. And then so many went back to Detroit or the suburbs of Detroit, especially. And they were constantly hitting me up to tell me I needed to come to Detroit. And again, I just always wanted to go to cities where I felt it was on the up and up. Like we get offers to go to New York, LA, Miami, Vegas, but there are other offerings there. And we watched the data points of what we thought was going to pop. And Detroit was off the chart. It was like, all of the signs were there. The city was like us against everybody. Everyone's supporting, everyone's so supportive. I've lived there for like months, building and getting it ready and training. And I've just fallen in love with the city. People couldn't be kinder and appreciative. And I love taking them on these explorations throughout Southeast Asia. I grew up on. I back and forth to the Philippines my entire life to visit family, and you always stop and China, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Laos, Cambodia, you name it. And it's just cool to take them on that journey through the menu.
I found it really interesting when you said early in the documentary that for a long time you'd sort of felt like you had to kind of like slip Filipino food in on the menu because there wasn't, an appetite for it in the US, and now, there's we're seeing a lot more Filipino restaurants taking off. There's a few that have opened in Detroit recently. I'm curious, like,
Cool.
what has been like that change of tide that now Filipino food is finally having its moment here.
Yeah, you're right. So Sunda is a mix of all sorts of Southeast Asian dishes and cocktails and other beverages because we felt like, well, one, it's a reflection of the journey that I had. I mean, we didn't go to the Philippines unless you had to stop in Tokyo or Beijing or Hong Kong or South Korea to get there. You know what I mean? And we did jump around to all these different countries because that was part of the experience. It's part of the open armed experience that the Philippines always had. We could always have sushi if we wanted it. We could have, these amazing steaks and different proteins and vegan dishes and all these other things because they inherently and organically live in Southeast Asia, these really robust flavors. But I think over the course of time, there's been a couple things that have made it a little bit more intriguing and caused more demand. And I would say part of it is that the explosion of chef and food TV has sort of made its way to the point where it's exposed these really interesting dishes and cultural sort of phenomenon situations paired with social media and these content creators that have now made it to the Philippines and are mind blown, just gushing about these ingredients, the people, the culture, the beauty, the white sand beaches, the blue waters, along with the ever growing talent pool that's started to say, you know what, I'm Filipino, but I no longer have to do French food or Italian or New American to actually make a living. I can do that. Plus, I can do the food I grew up on. I think it took a while, but those forces together, I think, have really opened the door to opportunity. And it's not easy. It's still not easy. You hear about these wins, but there's still a lot of folks struggling to say, how do I make this look pretty for the American palate? How do I get folks to try this?
Talk to me a bit about how would you describe Filipino food and what makes it so unique as a cuisine?
The most amazing distinctive characteristic of Filipino food is that it's always evolving. There's 7,641 islands in the Philippines, and that has been, influenced by so many different cultures and countries, whether, it's Spain or China or Mexico, Japan, India, Malaysia, the US, Africa, you name it. There's a dish, kare kare, that's in the movie that my Lola was really great and amazing at cooking. And the backstory on that, from what I've been told, is you know the British occupied the Philippines for a very brief amount of time relative to the all the other countries, and they had these Indian laborers and or sometimes called slaves that they were um, brought with them, and they would make these curries for them. Well, when they got to the Philippines, they didn't have the ingredients. The ingredients weren't indigenous to the Philippine Islands. But being as resourceful and relentless as the Filipino people are, they came together with all these ingredients, and that's when you saw the peanuts and the achote and all these other things that created their version of a curry, the kare kare, and it really ignited. I think the Kamayan feast is like one of the best examples of a Filipino food experience because you're literally getting on a banana leaf lined table. Sometimes we do them on these tables behind me, a 40-foot table of banana leaf, and then all the procession, the chefs come out with all the, dozen or so pieces that create this gigantic island feast. But we also do it on a nice butcher block at your table, customized with this big, of course, the foundation of the culture and the genre of food is the rice. And then we put the crispy pot and the confit pork shank, my favorite, right in the middle. And then street food is really popular throughout Southeast Asia, but especially in the Philippines. And then so you'll have like skewers of garlic shrimp and chicken in a sol and all of these, which is a great lemongrass achote type grilling chicken that I is one of my personal favorites. And then you have longanisa, which is the sausage that you saw in the documentary as well, and lumpia, this Chinese-inspired lumpia Shanghai, which is this Chinese-inspired Filipino egg roll with pork, shrimp, vegetables, all the things that my Lola used to make for us as after-school snacks. It's just a feast. And the story, again, it's all about story, was that when the Spanish, occupied and colonized the Philippines for 400 plus years, one of the things that they did was they instituted that it was mandatory to use silverware. And that was tough because the culture ate with their hands, like most of our ancestors did at some point. And the Kamayan meal to this day is really special because you're usually having it with your friends and family. Kamay means hand, and we're eating with our hands, this Kamayan meal. And it means, from the stories that were told, that when the day ended and the doors closed and the shades and the closed, and we were just alone again as Filipinos in our culture and family and friends with those we trusted, we could go back to the ways in which our ancestors ate on the banana leaves with our hands. And so very often in Detroit, I did this the first day of training. 100 people from all different backgrounds of throughout Michigan came together to be part of this concept called Sunda. And what do? We shut the doors, we close off the outside world, and we say, we are family now. This is a trust moment where we're together, and we will once again, like our ancestors, doesn't matter where in the world you are from, be connected through food. And it's a really special, spiritual kind of cool thing that people can now enjoy at Sunda at their table.
The idea of hospitality keeps coming up in the film, and the way that, like, a defining thing about, like, your grandfather was cooking these, like, huge goat feasts for the community. Like, talk to me a bit about that.
Well, the whole thing that was really amazing was I had some rough bumps where I was on my own growing up and had to not only pay for my own school and where I lived and just life, I also had to support my family. And going to law school was so hard because I was also working. I was also working, I don't know, 50, 60 hours a week. And it was just looked down upon. You were not supposed to work. It was just a very hard thing that I probably most people would have stopped something. But something kept me going, and just being there, hearing that my grandfather's story was very similar, and that after law school, I could have been a lawyer, but I chose to go into hospitality because I cared so much about making the community happy and safe and, feeling wonderful and taken care of. And he did the same thing. And although people came to him for advice and counsel and tried to give him things like, fruit or vegetables or meat or fish, he would turn around and cook it right back for them. And I saw the commonalities in our life stories, which was weird because there were so many kids and grandkids at his side when he was on his deathbed. And apparently the story goes, and I was only 2 at that time, the story goes, he said, before he passes, he just wanted to promise that one of his grandchildren would go to law school. And I had his name. His name was Monaco, and that's my middle name. And so there's always this like underlined message. No one ever said I had to, but it was an underlined message through storytelling. And I think that was where I kind of broke in the film. When I found that out, I was like, oh, like, did he help me get through this? Like, am I following his path? And is that all caring and comfort in the end? And is that hospitality? Because a lot of people think of hospitality as where they get their fix and pay money for food, or where they make money to deliver food. But this idea of, and I would never have had this life-changing moment in evolution had I not gone on this journey. That's really something really special about that.
Watch One Detroit, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.